Sometimes the most life-changing moments arrive when we least expect them at all. On a cold, snowy December evening, successful tech entrepreneur Darius King was simply trying to close a business deal on a remote Montana property when he discovered something that would shake him to his very core. Two small figures huddled beneath a snow-covered pine tree, twin girls, no more than 6 years old, their tear-streaked faces illuminated by the glow of his car headlights. Alone, frightened, and completely abandoned in the wilderness with a dangerous blizzard approaching fast, these innocent children were facing a long night that could have been their very last. But how did two precious souls end up abandoned in the middle of nowhere? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The leather portfolio on the passenger seat contained documents that represented the culmination of 18 months of careful negotiation. Darius King had built his fortune on understanding the value of things, software algorithms, real estate properties, investment opportunities, but he had never quite mastered the art of understanding people. At 52, he possessed the kind of wealth that granted him access to any luxury he desired. Yet he found himself driving alone through the Montana wilderness on a December evening, pursuing yet another business transaction that would add another zero to his already substantial bank account. The GPS on his dashboard indicated he was still 40 minutes from the remote cabin where he planned to finalize the purchase of a 1,000-acre property. The seller, an elderly rancher named Eugene Crawford, had insisted on meeting at the actual location rather than in a sterile conference room back in the city. Darius respected that old-school approach, even if it meant driving 3 hours through increasingly treacherous weather conditions. Snow had begun falling more heavily as he navigated the winding mountain road, his luxury sedan's headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. The radio crackled with weather warnings about an approaching blizzard system, but Darius pressed forward. He had built his company, King Tech Solutions, by refusing to let obstacles derail his plans. This philosophy had served him well in business, transforming a small software startup into a technology empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The irony was not lost on him that success had come at a considerable personal cost. Darius had dedicated the past 2 decades to building his empire, often working 16-hour days, traveling constantly, and prioritizing profit margins over personal relationships. His downtown penthouse apartment, though architecturally stunning and worth more than most people's lifetime earnings, felt more like an expensive hotel room than a home. He employed a housekeeper, a personal assistant, and a chef. But meaningful human connection remained elusive. The framed family photograph tucked away in his home office desk drawer served as a painful reminder of bridges he had allowed to burn through neglect and pride. The image, taken during Christmas 15 years earlier, showed Darius alongside his younger brother Marcus and sister Keisha, gathered around their mother Evelyn during what would be her final holiday season. In the photograph, they all wore genuine smiles, unaware that within 6 months their mother would succumb to cancer and their family bonds would unravel in the aftermath of grief and unresolved conflicts. Marcus had accused Darius of being too consumed with work to properly support their mother during her illness. Keisha had criticized his decision to hire private nurses instead of taking time off to provide personal care. Both siblings felt that Darius had tried to solve their mother's crisis with money rather than presence, and perhaps they had not been entirely wrong. By the time Evelyn passed away, the emotional distance between Darius and his siblings had grown into a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. The property he was traveling to purchase held sentimental value that his siblings would never understand. The 1,000 acres included the same type of pine forests where their family had camped during childhood summers, back when their father was still alive, and their mother's laughter filled the mountain air. Darius told himself that acquiring this land was a sound business investment, but deep down he wondered if he was attempting to buy back pieces of a happier past. His cell phone, mounted on the dashboard, displayed 17 missed calls and 43 unread text messages from his assistant regarding various business matters. Darius had instructed his team that he would be unreachable for the evening, but the corporate world rarely respected such boundaries. The constant demands of managing a technology empire meant that true solitude was a luxury he rarely experienced. He drove deeper into the wilderness. Darius reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. He possessed enough wealth to purchase almost anything, travel anywhere, and experience any luxury. Yet he spent most evenings alone in his penthouse, reviewing quarterly reports and planning the next acquisition. His dating life consisted of occasional dinners with accomplished women who seemed more interested in his financial portfolio than his personality. Genuine friendship had become nearly impossible to cultivate when every new relationship carried the underlying question of whether people valued him for who he was or what he could provide. The approaching meeting with Eugene Crawford represented more than just another business transaction. Crawford was 83 years old and had spent his entire life working the land that Darius intended to purchase. During their phone conversations, Crawford had spoken with the kind of wisdom that comes from decades of honest labor and simple living. He owned no computer, carried no smartphone, and conducted business with a handshake and his word. Darius found himself oddly envious of such an uncomplicated existence. The snowfall intensified as Darius navigated a particularly steep section of mountain road. His sedan, though equipped with advanced traction control systems, was not ideally suited for these conditions. He considered turning back and rescheduling the meeting, but something compelled him to continue forward. Perhaps it was his natural stubbornness, or perhaps it was a subconscious recognition that this journey represented something more significant than a simple real estate transaction. The radio weather report mentioned that the approaching storm system could dump up to 18 inches of snow before morning, with wind gusts reaching dangerous levels. Darius adjusted his grip on the steering wheel and reduced his speed, knowing that Crawford would be waiting at the cabin regardless of weather conditions. The old rancher had mentioned that he lived by the principle that a man's word was his bond, and weather was simply another challenge to overcome rather than an excuse to break commitments. As Darius rounded another curve in the mountain road, his headlights briefly illuminated a rustic wooden sign indicating that Crawford's property was just 5 miles ahead. The snowfall had transformed the landscape into a winter wonderland, but the beauty came with increasing danger. He estimated that he would need to complete the business meeting quickly and begin the return journey within an hour to avoid becoming stranded by the storm. The leather portfolio beside him contained not just purchase agreements and financial documents, but also a cashier's check that represented the largest single transaction of his recent business dealings. Crawford had agreed to sell the property for $12 million, a fair price for prime Montana real estate, but a sum that would allow the elderly rancher to live comfortably for the remainder of his days. Darius appreciated dealing with someone who understood the value of land and legacy rather than merely seeking the highest possible profit. The approaching headlights of what appeared to be Crawford's pickup truck created a brief moment of relief. But as the vehicle passed, Darius realized it was simply another traveler fleeing the mountains before the storm intensified. He was now truly alone on the mountain road, with only his determination and expensive vehicle standing between him and the increasingly hostile weather conditions. As his sedan crested another hill, Darius caught his first glimpse of the distant cabin where Crawford waited. A warm yellow glow emanated from the windows, suggesting a wood fire and the kind of simple comfort that money could not purchase. For reasons he could not fully explain, Darius felt a strange mixture of anticipation and melancholy as he approached. What should have been a routine business meeting. The portfolio, the check, and the legal documents represented the tools of his trade, the instruments through which he had built his empire and defined his identity. But as snow continued to fall and the cabin grew larger in his windshield, Darius wondered if there might be more to life than the endless accumulation of wealth and property. This thought, though fleeting, carried an emotional weight that surprised him as he prepared for what he believed would be just another successful business transaction in his carefully planned and profitable life. The first thing Darius noticed was that Crawford's cabin appeared completely dark despite their scheduled appointment. As he pulled into the gravel driveway, his headlights swept across the front porch, revealing no signs of recent activity. The absence of tire tracks in the fresh snow suggested that no one had visited the property for several hours. Darius checked his phone, but the remote location offered no cellular signal. He sat in his idling car for a moment, weighing his options in the growing storm. Perhaps Crawford had been delayed by the weather, or maybe Darius had misunderstood the meeting location. He decided to wait 15 minutes before beginning the treacherous drive back to town. The wind had intensified, causing snow to swirl violently around his vehicle. Each gust rocked the sedan slightly, reminding him of his vulnerable position in the wilderness. As he prepared to reverse out of the driveway, his peripheral vision caught something unusual near the tree line. The headlights had briefly illuminated what appeared to be fabric or clothing beneath a large pine tree about 50 yards from the cabin. Darius initially dismissed it as debris blown by the wind, but something about the shape nagged at his consciousness. He shifted the car into park and squinted through the windshield, trying to discern what he had glimpsed. The object seemed too large to be simple litter, and its position beneath the tree suggested it had been placed there deliberately rather than deposited by wind. Curiosity overrode caution as Darius grabbed a flashlight from his glove compartment and stepped into the biting cold. The snow crunched beneath his expensive leather shoes as he approached the tree, his flashlight beam dancing across the white ground. The wind immediately penetrated his business coat, reminding him that he was dressed for corporate meetings rather than mountain rescue operations. As he drew closer to the pine tree, his heart began to race with a growing sense of dread. What he discovered beneath the sweeping branches defied his immediate comprehension. Two small children, appearing to be identical twin girls, were huddled together against the base of the massive tree. They wore thin jackets that provided little protection against the harsh weather, and their exposed hands and faces showed the early signs of dangerous cold exposure. Snow had accumulated on their shoulders and hair, suggesting they had been there for quite some time. One twin clutched a small, threadbare teddy bear that had once been white, but now appeared grey from age and wear. The stuffed animal's button eyes seemed to stare at Darius with an expression that matched the frightened faces of the children who possessed it. This simple toy, clearly beloved despite its worn condition, would later serve as the only clue to their identity and the first tangible connection between Darius and these mysterious children. Both girls appeared to be sleeping, but as Darius's flashlight illuminated their faces, they stirred weakly. Their eyes opened slowly, revealing expressions of profound exhaustion and fear. Neither child spoke, but tears began streaming down their cheeks as they looked up at this strange man who had discovered their hiding place. The sight of their tear-streaked faces, illuminated by the stark beam of his flashlight, created an image that would remain burned into Darius's memory forever. "Hey there, sweethearts," Darius said softly, crouching down to their level, despite the snow soaking through his expensive trousers. "What are you doing out here? Where are your parents?" The twins remained silent, clinging to each other with the desperation of children who had learned that the world could be a dangerous and unpredictable place. Their breathing created small clouds in the frigid air, and Darius could see that both girls were shivering uncontrollably. He estimated their age at no more than 6 years old, far too young to survive a night in these conditions without adult protection. "We need to get you somewhere warm," Darius continued, his voice carrying the gentle authority he once used when speaking to his nephew and niece during family gatherings years earlier. "Can you walk to my car?" One twin, the one holding the teddy bear, managed a small nod, but when she attempted to stand, her legs buckled from cold and exhaustion. Darius immediately scooped both children into his arms, surprised by how light they felt. Their thin bodies seemed almost fragile against his chest as he carried them through the snow toward his sedan. The warmth of his car's interior created an immediate contrast that made both girls gasp. Darius quickly adjusted the heater to its maximum setting and retrieved a blanket from his emergency kit in the trunk. As he wrapped the children in the warmth, he noticed that their lips had taken on a bluish tint that indicated the early stages of hypothermia. "What are your names?" he asked gently, settling into the driver's seat and turning to face them. The twins sat close together in the back seat, sharing the blanket and the teddy bear between them. After a long moment, the twin without the bear whispered something so quietly that Darius could barely hear her over the car's heater. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Can you say that again?" "Maya," the girl repeated, her voice carrying the distinct accent of someone who had spoken another language before learning English. She gestured to her sister and added, "This is Mia." The names provided Darius with his first concrete information about these children, but they raised more questions than they answered. How had Maya and Mia ended up alone in the wilderness? Where were their parents or guardians? Why did they seem so frightened and exhausted? "Maya and Mia," Darius repeated, offering them a reassuring smile. "Those are beautiful names. I'm Darius. Can you tell me how you got here?" Both girls exchanged glances that seemed to carry a weight of shared experience beyond their years. Maya whispered something to her sister in what sounded like Spanish, and Mia shook her head slightly. The exchange suggested they were deciding how much information to share with this stranger who had found them. "Mama said to wait," Mia finally offered, her voice even quieter than her sister's. "She said someone would come." The simple statement hit Darius like a physical blow. These children had been deliberately left in the wilderness, abandoned by someone they trusted to wait for rescue that might never come. The realization that their mother had placed them in this life-threatening situation created a mixture of rage and heartbreak that surprised him with its intensity. "When did Mama tell you to wait here?" Darius asked, fighting to keep his voice calm and non-threatening. Maya held up fingers in a gesture that suggested counting, but her small hands trembled too violently to provide a clear answer. The snow accumulation on their clothing suggested they had been exposed to the elements for several hours at minimum. In these temperatures, with their inadequate clothing, survival through the night would have been unlikely. As Darius processed this information, his phone buzzed with a brief signal that indicated a single text message had managed to reach his device. The message was from Crawford, apologizing for missing their meeting due to a family emergency and suggesting they reschedule for the following week. The timing of this communication seemed almost supernatural, as if the universe had conspired to place Darius at this exact location at this precise moment. The twins' eyelids were growing heavy again as the warmth of the car began to overcome their exhaustion. Darius realized that he faced a decision that would alter the trajectory of his carefully ordered life. He could not simply leave these children in the wilderness, but taking them meant accepting responsibility for their welfare and safety. The approaching blizzard made driving to town increasingly dangerous, but remaining at the cabin with two hypothermic children offered no better alternatives. "We're going to get you somewhere safe and warm," Darius promised, more to himself than to the girls. "Everything is going to be okay now." As he shifted the car into drive and began the careful journey down the mountain road, Darius caught sight of Maya clutching her threadbare teddy bear more tightly. The small toy seemed to represent everything these children had left in the world, a tangible reminder of love and security in a situation that offered neither. The sight of that worn, stuffed animal would haunt Darius for days to come, serving as a symbol of innocence abandoned and trust betrayed, but also of hope that still endured in the hearts of two brave little girls who had somehow survived the unthinkable. The drive down the mountain tested every skill Darius had developed during years of navigating challenging business situations. The sedan's traction control system worked overtime as he maintained a cautious pace through increasingly treacherous conditions. In the rearview mirror, he could see Maya and Mia huddled together beneath the emergency blanket, their small forms barely visible in the dim light from the dashboard. Every few minutes, Darius glanced back to ensure both children were still breathing steadily. Their earlier shivering had subsided as the car's warmth enveloped them, but he remained concerned about the potential effects of their prolonged exposure to the elements. Neither twin had spoken since sharing their names, and their silence carried a weight that suggested trauma beyond simple cold and exhaustion. As his phone regained signal strength during the descent, it immediately erupted with missed call notifications and text messages. Darius ignored the business communications that had seemed so urgent just hours earlier. His assistant's messages about quarterly projections and merger negotiations felt absurdly trivial compared to the immediate needs of the two children sleeping in his back seat. The first viable option for medical care appeared after 40 minutes of careful driving. Mountain View Community Hospital sat on the outskirts of a small town that Darius had passed through earlier in the evening. The emergency room entrance glowed with bright fluorescent light that seemed almost harsh after the subdued illumination. Of his car's interior, Mia, Darius said softly as he parked near the hospital entrance. "We're going to see a doctor who will make sure you're both healthy and warm." Both twins stirred, but remained pressed close together, sharing the teddy, bare between them like a talisman against further uncertainty. Their eyes showed wariness that seemed disproportionate to their age, suggesting they had learned to approach new situations with caution rather than curiosity. The emergency room staff responded with professional efficiency when Darius appeared, carrying two small children who showed signs of cold exposure. A triage nurse immediately ushered them into a private examination room, where the harsh fluorescent lighting revealed details that the car's dim interior had obscured. Both twins appeared undernourished, with clothing that was clean but clearly second-hand and too large for their small frames. Their shoes were worn thin and provided little protection against cold or moisture. Most concerning to the medical staff were the signs of exhaustion that suggested they had been under stress for an extended period rather than simply experiencing a single night of exposure. Dr. Patricia Williams, the attending physician, approached the examination with gentle professionalism that immediately put the twins at ease. She spoke to them in both English and Spanish, discovering that while they understood both languages, they seemed more comfortable responding in Spanish. This linguistic preference provided Darius with additional clues about their background, while raising new questions about their family circumstances. Their core body temperatures are slightly below normal, but they don't appear to have suffered serious hypothermia, Dr. Williams explained to Darius as she completed her examination. However, I'm concerned about signs of dehydration and fatigue that suggest they've been under stress for more than just tonight. The small plastic hospital bracelets that were placed on each twin's wrist, blue for Maya and pink for Mia, became the first official documentation of their existence in Darius's world. These simple identification bands, bearing their names and medical record numbers, represented the beginning of a paper trail that would soon involve social services, law enforcement, and legal systems that Darius had never navigated as anything other than a wealthy donor or plaintiff. While the twins received medical attention, Darius found himself in the uncomfortable position of answering questions for which he had no adequate responses. The hospital's social worker, a middle-aged woman named Janet Rodriguez, approached him with the systematic thoroughness of someone accustomed to complicated family situations. "What is your relationship to these children?" Rodriguez asked. Her pen poised over a clipboard that contained forms requiring specific information that Darius could not provide. "I found them abandoned in the wilderness," Darius replied, immediately recognizing how inadequate this explanation sounded. "They were alone, hypothermic, and would not have survived the night without intervention." Rodriguez nodded with the expression of someone who had encountered similar situations, though probably not involving wealthy businessmen discovering children during real estate transactions. Her questions continued with professional detachment that masked genuine concern for the twins' welfare. "Do you have any information about their parents or guardians? Any documentation regarding their identity or circumstances?" Darius shook his head, feeling unusually helpless in a situation where his typical problem-solving strategies offered no solutions. He could not purchase, negotiate, or strategize his way through the complexities of child welfare systems. The twins' circumstances required patience, empathy, and navigation of bureaucratic processes that operated according to timelines measured in weeks rather than business hours. The girls mentioned that their mother told them to wait for someone to come, Darius explained. "They seem to have been deliberately placed at that location, but I have no information about why or by whom." As Rodriguez completed her initial assessment, she explained that the twins would need to remain under medical observation overnight while Child Protective Services investigated their circumstances. The hospital would provide temporary housing, but longer-term placement would depend on efforts to locate family members or suitable guardians. "Mr. King," Rodriguez said, studying Darius with the analytical gaze of someone trained to assess character and motivation. "These children clearly trust you, which is remarkable given their apparent trauma. Would you be willing to remain involved in their case while we work to understand their situation?" The question caught Darius off guard, not because he was unwilling to help, but because he had no experience with children and no framework for understanding what involvement might entail. His interactions with his nephew and niece had been limited to holiday visits and gift-giving occasions. The prospect of genuine responsibility for two traumatized children felt simultaneously compelling and terrifying. "Of course," he replied, surprising himself with the immediacy of his response. "Whatever they need." As the evening progressed, Darius found himself sitting beside the twins' hospital beds, watching them sleep peacefully for the first time since their rescue. Maya maintained her grip on the threadbare teddy bear even in sleep, while Mia had curled herself into a position that suggested she was accustomed to sleeping in confined or uncomfortable spaces. The hospital bracelets on their small wrists caught the light from the hallway, reminding Darius that these children had now entered a system designed to protect them, but that might also separate them from the one adult who had shown them kindness during their crisis. The plastic bands represented security and identification, but also bureaucracy and uncertainty. Dr. Williams returned near midnight with test results that confirmed her initial assessment. Both twins were suffering from mild malnutrition and dehydration, but had avoided serious medical complications from their exposure. More concerning were behavioral indicators that suggested they had experienced significant trauma or instability prior to being abandoned. "They're remarkably resilient," the doctor observed, glancing at the sleeping children. "But they've clearly learned to be self-sufficient in ways that children their age shouldn't need to understand. Someone taught them to survive, which suggests they've faced difficult circumstances before tonight." As Darius prepared to leave the hospital for the evening, Maya stirred and opened her eyes. She looked around the unfamiliar room with momentary panic before her gaze settled on Darius's face. The relief that crossed her expression created an unexpected tightness in his chest. "Are you leaving?" she whispered, her voice carrying fear that extended far beyond simple abandonment anxiety. "I'll be back in the morning," Darius promised, kneeling beside her bed. "You and Mia are safe here. The doctors and nurses will take good care of you tonight." Maya nodded solemnly, but her grip on the teddy bear tightened as if the worn toy could anchor her to this moment of security. As Darius walked toward the hospital exit, he carried with him the image of two small children wearing identification bracelets that connected them to a system he barely understood, but that had somehow become his responsibility to navigate. The morning brought a complexity that Darius had not anticipated during his restless night at the nearby hotel. He arrived at the hospital carrying coffee and pastries, uncertain about appropriate gifts for children, but wanting to offer something that might provide comfort. Maya and Mia were awake and sitting together in Maya's bed, sharing the threadbare teddy bear while quietly observing the bustling activity of the pediatric ward. Janet Rodriguez was waiting for him with a thick manila folder that would become the official record of the twins' entry into the child welfare system. The case file contained initial medical assessments, preliminary background checks, and a series of forms that required signatures and decisions that Darius felt unprepared to make. "We've made some progress overnight," Rodriguez explained, opening the folder to reveal typewritten reports and official documents. "The girls' fingerprints don't match any missing children reports in our database, which suggests they haven't been formally reported as missing. However, we did discover something interesting. The social worker removed a photograph from the file, a grainy image that appeared to have been taken from security camera footage. The picture showed a woman who resembled the twins walking with two small children through what appeared to be a bus station or transportation hub. The timestamp indicated the photo was taken 3 days earlier. This was captured at the Greyhound station in Billings," Rodriguez continued. "The woman purchased tickets for herself and 2 children, but only the children boarded the bus that evening. Station personnel remember her because she seemed distressed and spoke with the children for a long time before the departure." Darius studied the photograph, noting the woman's obvious resemblance to Maya and Mia. She appeared young, perhaps in her early 20s, with the same dark hair and delicate features as the twins. Her expression in the security footage showed a mixture of determination and heartbreak that suggested she was making an impossibly difficult decision. "Where was the bus headed?" Darius asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The route passes through the area where you found them," Rodriguez confirmed. "We believe their mother put them on that bus with instructions to wait at a specific location for someone to collect them. What we don't understand is why she didn't travel with them or who she expected to meet them." The implications of this revelation created a churning sensation in Darius's stomach. The twins had not been accidentally abandoned. They had been deliberately placed in that location by their mother as part of some plan that had apparently failed catastrophically. The thought of any parent making such a desperate choice raised questions about circumstances that must have driven someone to risk their children's lives. "Have you been able to identify the mother?" Darius inquired, setting down his coffee with hands that trembled slightly. Rodriguez shook her head, though her expression suggested ongoing efforts. "We're working with immigration services and law enforcement to determine her identity and current whereabouts. The bus ticket was purchased with cash, and she provided what appears to be false identification. However, we believe she may be undocumented, which could explain the elaborate arrangements." As they discussed the administrative complexities of the case, Maya appeared at Rodriguez's elbow with the quiet persistence of a child who had learned that adult conversations often determined her fate. She tugged gently on the social worker's sleeve and whispered something in Spanish that caused Rodriguez to kneel down to her level. "She wants to know if you're going to take them away from Mr. Darius," Rodriguez translated, her professional composure softening as she looked at the small girl's earnest expression. The question revealed the twins' growing attachment to Darius, but it also highlighted the precarious nature of their current arrangement. As a single man with no experience raising children, Darius represented an unconventional option for temporary placement. The state's preference would typically involve licensed foster families or relatives, neither of which appeared to be available. Maya, "Sweetheart," Rodriguez said gently in Spanish before switching to English, "we're trying to find the safest place for you and Mia to stay while we look for your mama. Mr. Darius wants to help, but there are rules we have to follow to make sure you're protected." The explanation, though kindly delivered, caused both twins to move closer to Darius with expressions that suggested they had heard similar promises before that had not been kept. Their wordless appeal for protection created a protective instinct in Darius that surprised him with its intensity. "What would be required for me to provide temporary placement?" Darius asked, though he had no clear understanding of what such a commitment might entail. Rodriguez consulted her case file, flipping through pages of regulations and requirements that seemed designed to discourage rather than facilitate unconventional arrangements. Emergency placement with non-relatives requires background checks, home assessments, and court approval. The process typically takes several weeks, and that's assuming no complications arise. The bureaucratic timeline felt absurd, given the immediate needs of two children who had already experienced abandonment and trauma. Darius found himself frustrated by systems that prioritized procedure over common sense, though he recognized that such regulations existed to protect vulnerable children from potentially dangerous situations. "In the meantime," Rodriguez continued, "the twins will need to be placed in temporary foster care while we complete the necessary evaluations. We have an experienced family about an hour away who specializes in emergency placements for children with trauma histories." The prospect of separating Maya and Mia from the one adult who had shown them consistent kindness seemed counterproductive to their emotional recovery. Both girls had remained calm and cooperative as long as Darius was present, but they showed signs of anxiety whenever he left their sight. Their attachment, though rapid, appeared to be providing crucial stability during an otherwise chaotic period. "Mr. King," Rodriguez said, studying him with the analytical gaze that had become familiar, "I need to ask about your motivation for wanting to help these children. Emergency placement is a significant responsibility that affects not just their immediate welfare, but also their long-term emotional development." The question forced Darius to examine his own motivations, which had evolved rapidly since the previous evening. His initial rescue had been driven by basic human decency and emergency response. His continued involvement reflected a growing sense of responsibility that extended beyond simple charitable obligation. "I don't have a complete answer to that question," Darius replied honestly, "but these children trust me, and I believe I can provide them with stability while you work to resolve their situation. I have resources, flexibility, and a genuine desire to ensure their welfare." Rodriguez made notes in the case file while Maya and Mia remained close to Darius, occasionally whispering to each other in Spanish while maintaining physical contact with either his hands or clothing. Their behavior suggested they had developed survival strategies that involved staying close to protective adults when such individuals could be identified. "There is one option that might expedite the process," Rodriguez said after consulting additional documents. "If you're serious about temporary placement, we could pursue emergency guardianship proceedings. This would require immediate court approval, but it would allow the children to remain with you while we complete standard evaluations." The legal terminology felt foreign to Darius, despite his extensive experience with corporate law. Emergency guardianship implied a level of responsibility that extended far beyond his initial rescue efforts. However, the alternative, placing Maya and Mia with strangers while bureaucracy proceeded at its typical pace, seemed unnecessarily traumatic for children who had already endured abandonment. What would emergency guardianship entail? Darius asked, recognizing that he was approaching a decision point that would fundamentally alter his carefully controlled existence. Legal responsibility for their daily care, medical decisions, and educational needs, Rodriguez explained. You would essentially function as their parent until we can locate their mother or identify suitable permanent placement. The concept of functioning as a parent felt simultaneously natural and terrifying to Darius. His business acumen provided no preparation for bedtime routines, emotional support, or the countless daily decisions involved in raising children. Yet something about Maya and Mia had awakened protective instincts that overrode his practical concerns about inexperience and disruption to his established lifestyle. As if sensing his internal debate, Maya approached him with the teddy bear extended in offering. The gesture, simple yet profound, seemed to represent her willingness to share her most precious possession with someone she had decided to trust. The worn, stuffed animal, having provided comfort during their darkest hours, now served as a bridge between their traumatic past and an uncertain but hopeful future. The courtroom felt more intimidating than any boardroom Darius had ever entered. Judge Margaret Harrison presided over emergency family court proceedings with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had witnessed countless family crises and understood that children's welfare hung in the balance of every decision. The temporary guardianship papers spread across the table before Darius represented a legal commitment that would transform him from successful bachelor to instant parent. "Mr. King," Judge Harrison said, reviewing the documents that Rodriguez had prepared. "With remarkable efficiency, emergency guardianship is not a casual arrangement. You would be accepting legal responsibility for two traumatized children whose backgrounds remain largely unknown. Are you prepared for the realities of this commitment?" Darius glanced at Maya and Mia, who sat quietly in chairs that seemed too large for their small frames. Both girls wore new clothing that Rodriguez had procured from the hospital's emergency supplies, but they still clutched the threadbare teddy bear that had become their shared security blanket. Their eyes remained fixed on Darius, with expressions that suggested their entire world depended on his response. "Your Honor, I understand the gravity of this responsibility," Darius replied, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice. "These children have already experienced abandonment and trauma. I believe providing them with stability during this uncertain period is more important than following conventional procedures." Judge Harrison's expression softened slightly as she observed the obvious bond between Darius and the twins. Maya had moved her chair closer to his and was leaning against his arm with the trusting affection of a child who had decided that this adult could be relied upon to provide protection. "The social services report indicates that you have no previous experience with children and limited family support," the judge continued. "How do you plan to address the practical challenges of childcare, education, and emotional support?" The question forced Darius to articulate plans that had been forming in his mind since the previous evening. "I have the financial resources to provide excellent medical care, educational opportunities, and any therapeutic services they might need. More importantly, I'm prepared to restructure my professional obligations to prioritize their welfare." This last statement represented a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Darius had spent decades building King Tech Solutions into an industry leader, often sacrificing personal relationships and experiences for corporate success. The prospect of voluntarily reducing his business involvement for the sake of two children he had known for less than 24 hours defied every principle that had guided his career. Rodriguez presented additional documentation that included background checks, financial statements, and character references that portrayed Darius as stable, responsible, and capable of providing appropriate care. The thoroughness of the paperwork reflected the social worker's belief that this unconventional arrangement served the twins' best interests despite its deviation from standard protocols. "I'm granting temporary emergency guardianship for a period of 30 days, Judge Harrison announced, signing the official documents that would legally place Maya and Mia under Darius's care. "During this period, Social services will conduct comprehensive evaluations and continue efforts to locate the children's mother. Mr. King, you'll be required to attend parenting classes and submit to regular home visits. The gavel's decisive sound marked the moment when Darius officially became responsible for two small lives that had been entrusted to his care by legal decree rather than biological connection. The guardianship papers, bearing the court's official seal, would become the foundation for every major decision affecting Maya and Mia's daily existence. As they left the courthouse, Darius felt the weight of responsibility settling around him like an unfamiliar but not unwelcome garment. The twins walked close beside him, with Maya holding his hand, and Mia maintaining contact by gripping his jacket sleeve. Their behavior suggested they had learned to remain physically connected to protective adults as a survival strategy. The drive to Darius's penthouse apartment marked another milestone in their unlikely family's formation. Maya and Mia pressed their faces against the sedan's windows as they entered the city, their expressions showing wonder at the tall buildings and busy streets that represented a world completely different from their recent experiences in rural abandonment. "This is where you live?" Maya asked as they rode the elevator to the penthouse, her voice carrying the awe of someone accustomed to more modest accommodations. "This is where we live now," Darius corrected gently, though he wondered how his sophisticated, urban dwelling would accommodate the needs of two young children who seemed more comfortable in smaller, cozier spaces. The penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist modern furniture, felt suddenly sterile and unwelcoming when viewed through the eyes of children who had been living in uncertainty and fear. Darius realized that creating a true home for Maya and Mia would require more than simply providing shelter. It would demand fundamental changes to his lifestyle and environment. "Are we allowed to touch things?" Mia whispered, studying the expensive artwork and glass surfaces that dominated the living space. "Everything here belongs to all of us now," Darius assured her, though he immediately began mentally cataloging items that might pose safety hazards or require protective measures. The transition from bachelor pad to family home would involve practical considerations he had never needed to contemplate. His assistant Caroline arrived within an hour, carrying shopping bags filled with children's clothing, toys, and basic necessities that Darius had requested via frantic phone calls. Caroline had worked for him for 8 years and had never encountered a situation that challenged her professional composure, but the sight of two small children in her employer's pristine apartment clearly tested her adaptability. "Mr. King," Caroline said quietly as the twins explored their new environment, "your schedule for the next 2 weeks includes 3 major client presentations, the quarterly board meeting, and the Singapore merger negotiations. How would you like me to handle these commitments?" The question highlighted the collision between Darius's corporate responsibilities and his new parental duties. Each item on his schedule represented months of preparation and millions of dollars in potential revenue, yet none of them seemed as important as ensuring Maya and Mia felt secure in their new home. "Reschedule everything that can be moved," Darius instructed, watching as Maya carefully examined a sculpture that cost more than most people's annual salaries. "For anything that absolutely cannot be postponed, arrange for virtual participation or delegate to senior staff." Caroline's expression suggested she understood the magnitude of this directive. In their years of working together, Darius had never voluntarily missed important business meetings or delegated high-stakes negotiations. His willingness to prioritize the twins' needs over corporate obligations represented a fundamental shift in his value system. The first night in the penthouse tested everyone's adjustment capabilities. Darius had hastily converted his home office into a temporary bedroom for the twins, though the space lacked the warmth and comfort that children required. Maya and Mia sat on the edge of one of the twin beds that Caroline had arranged to have delivered, sharing the teddy bear while surveying. their new surroundings with uncertainty. "Is this really our room?" Maya asked, her voice carrying doubt that this luxury could be permanent. "Yes, sweetheart," Darius replied, sitting on the floor beside their bed to maintain eye-level conversation. "This is your room for as long as you need it to be." Both girls exchanged glances that seemed to carry volumes of unspoken communication. Their shared experiences had created a bond that allowed them to communicate complex emotions with minimal words. The exchange suggested they were processing not just the immediate changes in their circumstances, but also the possibility that this security might prove temporary. "What if Mama comes back?" Mia asked quietly, voicing the hope and fear that both twins carried about their mother's eventual return. "If Mama comes back, we'll figure out what's best for everyone," Darius answered honestly. "But right now, my job is to keep you safe and help you feel at home here." As the twins settled into sleep, Darius remained nearby, listening to their whispered conversations in Spanish and occasional reassurances to each other about their new situation. The guardianship papers lay on his desk in the next room, their legal language representing promises and responsibilities that extended far beyond temporary shelter. The threadbare teddy bear, positioned carefully between Maya and Mia as they slept, served as a bridge between their traumatic past and uncertain future. This simple toy had witnessed their abandonment and rescue, their fear and growing trust, and now their tentative acceptance of a new life with someone who was learning to love them despite having no blueprint for such devotion. 2 weeks into their new arrangement, Darius discovered that parenting involved countless small decisions that no business school had prepared him to handle. The morning routine alone required strategic planning that rivaled corporate merger negotiations, coordinating breakfast preferences, school preparation, and emotional support while maintaining his own professional obligations through remote work and early morning conference calls. Maya had emerged as the more vocal twin, asking questions about everything from the elevator's operation to the purpose of his various electronic devices. Her curiosity seemed boundless, though certain topics, particularly anything related to their mother or life before the abandonment, remained off-limits in their conversations. Mia remained quieter, often communicating through gestures and expressions while maintaining her constant grip on the now familiar teddy bear. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning while the twins were eating breakfast at the kitchen island that Darius had never previously used for anything other than displaying expensive coffee equipment. Caroline had sorted the mail as usual, but this particular envelope caught her attention because it bore the return address of Marcus King, Darius's younger brother, whom he had not spoken to in nearly 5 years. "Mr. King," Caroline said, placing the letter beside his coffee cup with the diplomatic caution she employed when dealing with potentially sensitive matters. "This appears to be personal correspondence from your family." Darius recognized Marcus's handwriting immediately, though the careful penmanship seemed more formal than the hasty scrawl he remembered from their youth. The envelope's weight suggested multiple pages, unusually lengthy communication from a brother who had previously expressed his feelings about Darius's priorities in brief, pointed conversations that ended with accusations and unresolved anger. Maya looked up from her cereal bowl with the acute observational skills that trauma had taught her to develop. "Is something wrong?" she asked, noting the tension that had appeared in Darius's expression at the sight of the envelope. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart," Darius replied, though he suspected that both twins had become expert at reading adult emotions as a survival mechanism. "Finish your breakfast, and then we'll get ready for your appointment with Dr. Chen." The mention of their weekly therapy session caused both girls to exchange glances that had become familiar to Darius. Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery, had been working with Maya and Mia to address the emotional effects of their abandonment. The sessions represented necessary healing, but they also required the twins to revisit painful memories that they would prefer to forget. After ensuring the twins were safely in Caroline's care for the morning, Darius retreated to his home office to read Marcus's letter in private. The familiar penmanship transported him back to childhood memories of homework assistance and shared adventures before adult responsibilities and unresolved grief had damaged their relationship. The letter began with an acknowledgement that surprised Darius with its tone of reconciliation rather than accusation. Marcus had apparently learned about the twins through mutual business contacts who had noticed Darius's reduced corporate involvement and investigated the reasons for his changed priorities. "Darius," the letter read, "I heard through David Morrison that you've taken in 2 children under unusual circumstances. I'll admit that my first reaction was skepticism. You've never shown interest in family responsibilities, and your track record with commitment hasn't been encouraging. But David said something that made me reconsider my assumptions about your motivations." The reference to David Morrison, a fellow entrepreneur who moved in the same social circles, suggested that Darius's new role as guardian had become a topic of conversation within their professional community. He wondered what details had been shared and whether his business reputation was being affected by his unconventional family arrangements. Marcus continued, "David mentioned that you turned down the Singapore merger deal, worth $40 million, in consulting fees according to the financial journals, because you didn't want to travel while the children were adjusting to their new situation. When I heard that, I realized that something fundamental had changed in your priorities. The Darius I remember wouldn't have sacrificed a major business opportunity for anyone." The observation stung because it contained enough truth to force Darius to confront his own past failures. He had indeed prioritized business success over family relationships, choosing corporate advancement over the emotional needs of people who should have mattered more than profit margins. Marcus's letter served as an uncomfortable mirror reflecting years of decisions that had valued achievement over human connection. "I've been thinking about Mum's last words to us," Marcus wrote, transitioning to memories that Darius had spent years trying to suppress. "She said that family was the only wealth that really mattered, and that we needed to take care of each other after she was gone. Instead, we let grief and pride tear us apart. Maybe these children represent a second chance for you to understand what she meant." The reference to their mother's final words created a tightness in Darius's chest that he had not experienced since her funeral. Evelyn King had indeed spoken about family loyalty and mutual support during her final weeks, but her sons had been too consumed with their own pain and anger to honor her wishes. The dissolution of their family relationships had felt inevitable at the time, but Marcus's letter suggested that healing remained possible. "Keisha and I would like to meet Maya and Mia," the letter continued, "not because we're judging your ability to care for them, but because we want to support you in this new role. If you're truly committed to being their guardian, then they're part of our family too. Mum would have wanted us to welcome them with open hearts." The invitation represented an opportunity for reconciliation that Darius had never expected to receive. His siblings' willingness to embrace Maya and Mia despite their complicated history suggested that the twins' presence might serve as a catalyst for healing wounds that had seemed permanently damaged. When Maya and Mia returned from their therapy session, they found Darius sitting in the living room with Marcus's letter spread across the coffee table. Dr. Chen had accompanied them upstairs to discuss their progress with Darius, a routine that had become part of their weekly check-in process. "The girls are making remarkable progress," Dr. Chen reported, settling into the chair across from Darius while the twins settled on the couch nearby. "They're beginning to develop secure attachment patterns, though they still show signs of hypervigilance and separation anxiety." The clinical terminology described behaviors that Darius had observed but not fully understood. Maya and Mia remained constantly aware of his location within the apartment, and both girls showed distress when he left for any extended period. Their survival instincts, honed by abandonment and uncertainty, would require time and consistency to heal. However, Dr. Chen continued, "I'm concerned about some details they've shared about their life before the abandonment. Their descriptions suggest they may have witnessed domestic violence or other traumatic events that preceded their mother's decision to send them away." This revelation added new layers to an already complex situation. The twins' trauma extended beyond simple abandonment to include experiences that would require specialized therapeutic intervention and careful handling. Darius realized that his commitment to their welfare would involve not just providing shelter and security, but also helping them heal from wounds that might affect them for years to come. "What does that mean for their long-term recovery?" Darius asked, watching as Maya absently stroked the teddy bear while listening to their conversation with the focused attention of someone accustomed to adult discussions determining her fate. "It means they'll need continued therapy, stable relationships, and probably medication to address anxiety and sleep disorders," Dr. Chen explained. "The good news is that they've formed a strong attachment to you, which provides the foundation for healing. Children are remarkably resilient when they feel truly safe." As Dr. Chen departed, Darius found himself contemplating Marcus's letter in light of the twins' ongoing needs. The prospect of rebuilding relationships with his siblings would provide Maya and Mia with extended family connections that could support their development. More importantly, it might offer them examples of adults who could work through conflicts and maintain loving relationships despite past difficulties. "Who was in the letter?" Maya asked, with the directness that had become characteristic of her communication style. "My brother Marcus," Darius replied, recognizing that the twins deserved honesty about the people who might become part of their lives. "He wants to meet you and Mia." Both girls processed this information with the careful consideration they applied to any change in their circumstances. Their experiences had taught them that new people could represent either support or threat, and they evaluated each situation with wisdom that exceeded their years. "Is he nice like you?" Mia asked quietly, speaking more words than she typically used in casual conversation. "He used to be," Darius answered, realizing that he was uncertain about the man his brother had become during their years of estrangement. "I think he wants to be part of our family now." The concept of expanding their small family unit seemed to intrigue Maya while causing visible anxiety in Mia. Their different responses reflected the distinct ways they processed change and stress. Maya, through engagement and questions, Mia through careful observation and protective withdrawal. As evening settled over the city, Darius sat with the twins while they completed homework assignments from their new school. The sight of their small heads bent over math problems and reading exercises had become one of his favorite daily moments, a peaceful routine that represented stability and normal childhood experiences. Marcus's letter lay folded on his desk, representing both opportunity and risk. The decision to rebuild family relationships would affect not just Darius, but also two children who had already experienced the devastating effects of adult choices beyond their control. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Detective Ray Sullivan from the Montana State Police had been investigating the twins' case as part of a broader inquiry into human trafficking networks operating along interstate transportation routes. His phone call arrived on a Friday afternoon, while Darius was helping Maya with a science project about renewable energy sources, an ironic topic given how the twins had renewed his own life in ways he was still discovering. "Mr. King," Detective Sullivan said, his voice carrying the weight of information that would change everything they thought they understood about Maya and Mia's situation. We've made some significant progress in identifying the twins' mother, and there are details you need to know before we proceed with the investigation. Darius glanced at the twins, who were working quietly at the kitchen island, while listening to his side of the conversation with the acute attention they applied to any discussion that might affect their lives. Their survival instincts had taught them to monitor adult communications for signs of impending changes in their circumstances. "Can this wait until the children are asleep?" Darius asked, recognizing that whatever information the detective had discovered might be disturbing or confusing for Maya and Mia to overhear. "Actually, sir, I think you'll want to sit down for this conversation," Sullivan replied. "And you might want to have the children nearby, because what I'm about to tell you affects them directly." The gravity in the detective's voice created an immediate sense of foreboding that caused Darius to guide Maya and Mia to the living room where they could sit together on the couch. Both twins instinctively moved closer to him, with Maya taking his hand and Mia maintaining contact with his arm while clutching the threadbare teddy bear that had become her constant companion. "We've identified the twins' mother as Sofia Rodriguez," Detective Sullivan began, consulting what sounded like official documents. "She's a 24-year-old undocumented immigrant who entered the country 18 months ago fleeing domestic violence in El Salvador. But here's where the story becomes complicated. Sofia Rodriguez is married to Carlos Rodriguez, who works for a landscaping company in Billings." Darius waited for the connection that would explain why this information required such dramatic presentation. The details about Sofia's background painted a picture of someone seeking refuge from violence, but they didn't immediately clarify why Detective Sullivan considered this information so significant. "Mr. King," Sullivan continued, "Carlos Rodriguez has been working for Evergreen Landscaping for the past 8 months. Evergreen Landscaping is the company that maintains the grounds for several properties in your real estate portfolio, including the Montana property where you found the twins." The revelation hit Darius like a physical blow. The random discovery that had changed his life was not random at all. It was connected to his business empire in ways that suggested careful planning rather than coincidental abandonment. Sofia Rodriguez had somehow known about his connection to that property and had deliberately chosen it as the location where her daughters would be found. "There's more," Sullivan said, apparently sensing Darius's shock through his silence. "We've discovered that Sofia has been researching you for several weeks before abandoning the twins. She accessed public records about your charitable donations, particularly your contributions to children's organizations and immigrant support services. She also obtained copies of newspaper articles about your business success and personal background." Maya and Mia exchanged glances that suggested they were processing information they had suspected but never articulated. Their mother had not randomly chosen their abandonment location. She had specifically selected Darius King as the person she hoped would find and care for her daughters. The implications of this revelation recontextualized every aspect of their rescue and placement. "Why?" Darius asked, though he suspected the answer would be both heartbreaking and complicated. "According to our investigation, Sofia was planning to leave Carlos due to escalating domestic violence that was affecting the twins," Sullivan explained. "She discovered she was pregnant with another child and feared for everyone's safety. However, as an undocumented immigrant with limited resources, she couldn't see a way to escape with 3 children and provide adequate care for all of them." The detective paused, allowing Darius to absorb the magnitude of Sofia's impossible situation. A young mother facing violence, carrying an unborn child, and responsible for twin daughters, had been forced to make a choice that no parent should ever have to consider. Sofia researched successful businessmen in the area who had demonstrated charitable inclinations toward children, Sullivan continued. Your name appeared repeatedly in local newspapers for educational donations and youth program funding. She apparently decided that you represented her daughter's best chance for a safe, stable future. As the full scope of Sophia's plan became clear, Darius felt a mixture of admiration and heartbreak for a young woman who had sacrificed her own maternal desires to ensure her children's survival. The bus station security footage now carried different meaning. Sophia had not abandoned her daughters in desperation, but had executed a carefully researched plan to place them with someone she believed could provide opportunities she could never offer. Detective Sullivan's next words carried even more significant implications. We have physical evidence that Sophia spent 3 days observing your property before implementing her plan. She knew your schedule, understood that you would be traveling that route on that specific evening, and timed the twins' placement to ensure you would find them. The revelation that Sophia had orchestrated their entire meeting transformed Darius's understanding of the rescue that had seemed like divine intervention or remarkable coincidence. Every aspect of that snowy evening, from the cancelled meeting with Crawford to the exact timing of his departure, had been carefully planned by a desperate mother who had conducted thorough reconnaissance to ensure her daughter's discovery. By the right person. "Where is Sophia now?" Darius asked, dreading the answer but needing to understand the complete picture. "That's the most difficult part of this investigation," Sullivan replied. "Sophia disappeared the same night she placed the twins at your property. Carlos Rodriguez reported her missing 3 days later, claiming she had left voluntarily. However, we've discovered evidence suggesting that Carlos may have discovered her escape plan and intercepted her before she could reach safety. The implications of this information created a cold sensation in Darius's stomach. Sophia Rodriguez had risked everything to save her daughters from a dangerous situation, and her sacrifice might have cost her life. The twins were not just abandoned children, they were orphans whose mother had died protecting them from violence they were too young to fully understand. Maya had been listening to the conversation with increasing tension, and she finally spoke, with a voice that carried wisdom beyond her years. "Mama isn't coming back, is she?" The question forced Darius to confront the reality that both twins had suspected but never articulated. Their mother's failure to collect them from the wilderness had not been due to changed plans or unforeseen circumstances. It had been the result of violence that had ended her life while she was trying to protect theirs. "We don't know for certain, sweetheart," Darius replied honestly, "but Detective Sullivan is working very hard to find out what happened to your mama." Mia moved closer to Darius, pressing her face against his chest while maintaining her grip on the teddy bear. Her silence carried more emotional weight than any words could express. She had understood the implications of the detective's information and was processing the likelihood that their mother would never return. Detective Sullivan continued his briefing with information that would affect the twins' legal status and future. "We've also discovered that Maya and Mia were born in the United States during Sophia's previous relationship, which makes them American citizens despite their mother's undocumented status. This significantly simplifies their legal situation and your guardianship arrangement. The birth certificates that Sullivan would email to Darius within the hour would serve as crucial legal documents establishing the twins' identity and citizenship. These official papers would replace the hospital bracelets and emergency documentation that had previously defined their legal existence. More importantly, they would confirm that Maya and Mia belonged in the country where their mother had hoped. They would find safety and opportunity. "There's one more thing you need to know," Sullivan said, his voice carrying a note of hesitation that suggested additional complications. "Carlos Rodriguez has been asking questions about the twins since Sophia's disappearance. He claims parental rights as Sophia's husband and has expressed interest in locating them." However, our investigation suggests his motivations may not be related to genuine concern for their welfare. The prospect of Carlos Rodriguez attempting to claim the twins created a new threat that Darius had not anticipated. If Sophia had been fleeing domestic violence that involved her husband, then his desire to locate Maya and Mia represented potential danger rather than legitimate family reunion. The legal complexities of this situation would require careful navigation to ensure the twins' continued safety. As Detective Sullivan concluded his briefing and promised to provide additional updates as the investigation progressed, Darius found himself holding two small children whose entire story had been rewritten by information that transformed them from abandoned orphans into the deliberately placed daughters of a murdered mother. Maya looked up at him with eyes that carried a mixture of hope and fear. "Are we safe here?" she asked, voicing the concern that had become central to both twins' emotional well-being. "Yes," Darius replied with absolute conviction, recognizing that his commitment to their protection had deepened beyond legal guardianship into something approaching parental devotion. "You are safe here, and I will never let anyone hurt you." The threadbare teddy bear that Mia continued to clutch had now become more than a comfort object. It was a tangible connection to a mother who had loved them enough to sacrifice her own life, ensuring their safety. The worn, stuffed animal represented Sofia Rodriguez's final gift to her daughters, the hope that someone else would love them as completely as she had, even if she could not survive to see them grow up. The birth certificates that would arrive by email that evening would confirm Maya and Mia's legal right to the safety and opportunities that Darius could provide. But more importantly, they would serve as proof of their mother's love and the lengths to which she had gone to secure their future, even at the cost of her own life. The emergency protective order lay spread across Darius's desk like a shield made of legal language and judicial authority. Attorney Sarah Morrison had expedited the paperwork after Detective Sullivan's briefing, recognizing that Carlos Rodriguez's inquiries about the twins represented a credible threat that required immediate legal intervention. The document, bearing the official seal of the Montana District Court, prohibited Rodriguez from contacting, approaching, or attempting to locate Maya and Mia under penalty of immediate arrest. "This provides temporary protection," Morrison explained during their early morning conference call, "but we need to prepare for the possibility that Rodriguez will challenge your guardianship through legal channels. As Sophia's husband, he could claim parental rights that complicate our position." Darius studied the protective order while listening to Maya and Mia's quiet conversation in the kitchen, where they were eating breakfast under Caroline's watchful supervision. Both twins had been unusually subdued since learning the truth about their mother's fate, processing grief and fear in ways that demonstrated remarkable resilience alongside heartbreaking maturity. "What's our strongest defense against a custody challenge?" Darius asked, recognizing that legal strategy would determine whether he could continue protecting the children who had become the center of his world. "The fact that Sophia specifically chose you as their guardian, combined with evidence of domestic violence in Rodriguez's history," Morrison replied. "We're also strengthened by the twins' obvious attachment to you and their statements to Dr. Chen about feeling safe in your care." The mention of Dr. Chen reminded Darius that Maya and Mia had individual therapy sessions scheduled for that afternoon, appointments that had become even more crucial since they learned about their mother's likely death. Both children were struggling with complex emotions about Sophia's sacrifice, their own survival, and the possibility that the man she had fled might still pose a threat to their safety. Marcus and Keisha had arrived from Denver the previous evening, responding to Darius's call for family support with the kind of immediate assistance that reminded him of their childhood bond before grief and pride had created years of separation. Their presence in the penthouse created a sense of extended family that Maya and Mia had never experienced, though both twins remained cautious about trusting new adults too quickly. Uncle Marcus brought presents, Maya announced as she entered the office, her voice carrying tentative excitement tempered by wariness about accepting gifts from someone she barely knew. The title Uncle Marcus had emerged naturally during the previous evening's introductions, though both twins had required Darius's explicit permission before using family terms for his siblings. Their caution about claiming relationships reflected their experiences with adults who had proven unreliable or dangerous, making their gradual acceptance of extended family connections particularly meaningful. Marcus appeared in the doorway carrying coffee and wearing the expression of someone who was processing his own complex emotions about suddenly becoming an uncle to two traumatized children. His relationship with Darius remained tentative after years of estrangement, but their shared commitment to protecting Maya and Mia had created common ground for rebuilding their bond. "How are our girls this morning?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair across from Darius, while Maya climbed into her designated spot on the office couch. The possessive pronoun our had become natural language for describing the twins among the extended King family, reflecting their collective acceptance of Maya and Mia as permanent family members rather than temporary responsibilities. This linguistic shift represented emotional commitment that exceeded legal guardianship arrangements. "They're being brave," Darius replied, watching as Maya absently stroked the threadbare teddy bear that Mia had temporarily surrendered while getting dressed. "But they understand that we're preparing to protect them from someone who might try to take them away." Keisha joined them, carrying a folder filled with research she had conducted about family law, child welfare procedures, and legal precedents for custody disputes involving domestic violence survivors. Her background as a social worker provided expertise that complemented Morrison's legal knowledge, creating a comprehensive support system for navigating the challenges ahead. "I've been reviewing Carlos Rodriguez's background," Keisha reported, consulting her notes while speaking quietly to avoid alarming Maya, who was listening with the focused attention she applied to any adult conversation that might affect her life. "He has 2 previous arrests for domestic violence, though Sophia never pressed charges in either case." The pattern of violence, followed by reconciliation, reflected the cycle that trapped many domestic abuse victims in relationships that escalated from emotional manipulation to physical danger. Sophia's decision to flee while pregnant with a third child suggested that Rodriguez's behavior had reached a level that threatened not just her safety, but the lives of all her children. "Dr. Chen wants to interview the twins about their memories of Carlos," Keisha continued. "Their testimony could provide crucial evidence about his character and their feelings about potential contact with him." The prospect of Maya and Mia having to relive traumatic memories for legal purposes created conflicting emotions in Darius. He understood the necessity of building a strong case against Rodriguez, but he hated the idea of subjecting the twins to additional stress when they were still processing their mother's death and adjusting to their new life. "Let's schedule the interviews for tomorrow," Darius decided. "They need time to prepare emotionally, and I want to be present to provide support." As the morning progressed, Darius found himself implementing security measures that felt simultaneously necessary and surreal. The building's concierge had been provided with Rodriguez's photograph and instructions to deny him access under any circumstances. Caroline had adjusted the twins' school pickup procedures to ensure they were never left unattended in public spaces. Even their therapy appointments would now include security escorts as precautionary measures. The transformation of their daily routines from normal family activities to protective protocols highlighted how Rodriguez's threat had altered the fundamental nature of their lives. Maya and Mia adapted to these changes with the flexibility that trauma had taught them to develop, but Darius could see the stress affecting their behavior in subtle ways. "Are we going to have to move away?" Mia asked during lunch, voicing the fear that had been growing since Detective Sullivan's revelations about their mother's research and Carlos Rodriguez's inquiries. "No, sweetheart," Darius assured her, though he had privately considered relocating as a potential safety measure. "This is our home, and we're going to stay here. The police and lawyers are making sure that no one can hurt us." The confidence in his voice reflected a determination that had surprised him with its intensity. 3 weeks earlier, his primary concerns had involved quarterly profit reports and expansion strategies. Now he was prepared to use every resource at his disposal, financial, legal, and personal, to protect 2 children who had become more precious to him than any business achievement. That afternoon, while Maya and Mia attended their therapy sessions, Darius met with a private security consultant who specialized in family protection. The conversation covered topics he had never imagined needing to understand: threat assessment protocols, safe transportation procedures, and emergency communication. Systems that could summon immediate assistance if Rodriguez somehow bypassed their legal protections. The good news is that restraining orders are typically effective deterrents, the consultant explained, while reviewing the protective order documentation. Most domestic abusers avoid actions that would result in immediate arrest and prosecution. However, we should prepare contingency plans in case Rodriguez decides to ignore legal consequences. The contingency plans included safe house locations, alternative transportation routes, and communication procedures that would allow the twins to maintain their normal routines while ensuring their safety. The complexity of these preparations reminded Darius that protecting Maya and Mia might require ongoing vigilance rather than temporary precautions. When the twins returned from therapy, Dr. Chen provided an update that mixed encouraging progress with concerning observations. "They're processing their grief about Sophia in healthy ways," she reported, "but they're also showing increased anxiety about potential separation from you. The threat of Carlos Rodriguez has reactivated their abandonment fears." This information reinforced Darius's determination to fight any custody challenge with every available resource. The twins had already endured abandonment, trauma, and the loss of their mother. The possibility of forcing them into the custody of someone they feared represented a level of additional harm that he would not allow to occur. That evening, as Maya and Mia completed homework assignments while Marcus and Keisha prepared dinner, Darius reflected on how completely his life had changed since discovering 2 small figures beneath a snow-covered pine tree. His penthouse had been transformed from a sterile bachelor residence into a warm family home filled with children's laughter, homework supervision, and the kind of daily routines that created emotional security. The protective order on his desk represented both shield and sword in the battle to preserve this new life they had built together. Its legal language provided official recognition that Maya and Mia deserved protection from the violence their mother had died trying to escape. More importantly, it represented society's acknowledgement that love and commitment could create family bonds that transcended biological relationships. "Darius?" Maya said, appearing beside his desk with the quiet persistence she used when processing difficult emotions. "If something happens to you, what happens to us?" The question forced him to confront fears he had been avoiding about his own vulnerability in this situation. Rodriguez's violence had already claimed Sophia's life, and desperate people sometimes made choices that endangered everyone around them. "Nothing is going to happen to me," Darius replied, pulling Maya onto his lap with the gentle affection that had become natural between them. "But if it did, Uncle Marcus and Aunt Keisha would take care of you. You will always have family who loves you." The promise represented more than comfort for a frightened child. It reflected the reality that the King family had been restored and strengthened by the addition of 2 small girls who had taught them that love could heal wounds that had seemed permanent. Maya's satisfied nod suggested she understood that her security extended beyond any single individual to encompass an entire family committed to her protection. As bedtime approached, Darius helped the twins with their evening routine, while privately reviewing the legal strategies and security measures that would determine their ability to remain together as a family. The threadbare teddy bear, positioned carefully between Maya and Mia as they settled into sleep, served as a reminder of their mother's love and the responsibility he had accepted to honor her sacrifice by providing the safe, stable future she had died trying to secure for her daughters. The emergency custody petition arrived on a Monday morning with the stark formality of legal documents that could shatter lives with administrative efficiency. Caroline signed for the certified delivery while Darius was helping Maya practice reading aloud from a chapter book about brave children overcoming obstacles, an ironic choice given the battle they were about to face in reality. "Mr. King," Caroline said, approaching with the envelope that bore the familiar seal of the Montana family court, "this appears to require immediate attention." The petition, filed by Carlos Rodriguez through a court-appointed attorney, challenged Darius's guardianship on grounds that blood relatives possessed superior rights to care for Sophia's children. Rodriguez's legal argument claimed that his marriage to Sophia granted him parental authority over Maya and Mia, despite evidence of domestic violence and their mother's deliberate efforts to remove them from his influence. "When is the hearing?" Darius asked, scanning the legal documents while maintaining enough composure to avoid alarming the twins, who were watching his expression with the acute attention they applied to any situation that might affect their security. "Thursday morning," Caroline replied, checking the calendar on her tablet. "That gives us 3 days to prepare." 3 days felt simultaneously like an eternity, and an impossibly brief preparation period for a legal battle that would determine whether Maya and Mia remained with the family who loved them or were surrendered to the man their mother had died trying to escape. The abbreviated timeline suggested that Rodriguez's attorney understood the emotional advantage of forcing quick decisions before Darius could build comprehensive legal defenses. Sarah Morrison arrived within 2 hours, carrying additional documentation that painted a clearer picture of Rodriguez's legal strategy. His petition claimed that Darius had illegally removed the children from their rightful guardian and that his wealth and influence had manipulated social services into approving inappropriate placement arrangements. "He's essentially arguing that you kidnapped his stepchildren," Morrison explained, while reviewing the custody petition in Darius's office. "It's a weak legal argument, but it could be emotionally compelling to a judge who doesn't understand the full circumstances." The accusation of kidnapping transformed Darius's rescue of the twins from humanitarian intervention into potential criminal activity in the eyes of someone unfamiliar with the evidence of Sophia's deliberate planning. Rodriguez's attorney had crafted a narrative that portrayed a grieving stepfather seeking to reunite with children who had been improperly taken from their family. "What evidence do we have to counter this narrative?" Darius asked, recognizing that legal battles often turned on competing stories rather than simple facts. Detective Sullivan's investigation, the twins' testimony to Dr. Chen, and documentation of Sophia's research into your background, Morrison replied. "We also have medical records showing the children's improvement under your care and character. References from teachers, therapists, and social workers." The mention of the twins' testimony created a knot of anxiety in Darius's stomach. Maya and Mia would be required to testify about their memories of Carlos Rodriguez and their feelings about potentially returning to his custody. The prospect of forcing traumatized children to relive their fears in a formal legal setting felt cruel, but their voices might provide the most compelling evidence for maintaining their current placement. Dr. Chen arrived that afternoon to help prepare Maya and Mia for the possibility of testifying in court. Her gentle approach to difficult topics had earned the twins' trust over weeks of therapy sessions. But this conversation would require them to confront their worst fears about losing the security they had found with Darius. "Girls," Dr. Chen said, settling into the living room where both twins had gathered with their homework and the threadbare teddy bear that continued to provide comfort during stressful moments. "We need to talk about something important that might happen this week." Maya immediately moved closer to Darius, taking his hand with the desperate grip of someone preparing to fight for her survival. Mia clutched the teddy bear more tightly while fixing her attention on Dr. Chen's face with the focused intensity she used when processing information that might determine her fate. "Carlos wants the court to say that you should live with him instead of with Darius," Dr. Chen explained, using language appropriate for children while avoiding euphemisms that might obscure the gravity of the situation. The name Carlos caused both twins to react with visible fear that confirmed everything Dr. Chen had documented about their trauma history. Maya's grip on Darius's hand tightened painfully, while Mia seemed to shrink into herself as if making herself smaller could provide protection from an approaching threat. "We don't want to go with Carlos," Maya said with quiet determination that carried emotional weight beyond her years. "He hurt Mama. He made her cry." This simple statement provided crucial testimony about the domestic violence that had driven Sophia to sacrifice her life protecting her daughters. Maya's willingness to speak about Rodriguez's behavior suggested that the twins understood the importance of sharing their truth, even when discussing it caused them obvious distress. "I know you don't want to go with Carlos," Dr. Chen replied, gently. "That's why we need to tell the judge about your feelings so she can make the best decision for you and Mia." The concept of a judge, a stranger with the power to determine their future, represented another adult whose decisions could override their own desires and feelings. Maya and Mia had learned that their preferences carried little weight in situations controlled by adults, but Dr. Chen's explanation suggested that this time their voices might actually influence the outcome. "Will Darius be there?" Mia asked, quietly, speaking more words than she typically used in conversation with adults other than Darius himself. "Yes, sweetheart," Darius assured her, recognizing that his presence might provide the emotional support necessary for them to testify effectively. "I'll be right there with you, and we'll face this together." The promise reflected his commitment to supporting the twins through whatever legal challenges lay ahead, but it also carried the weight of uncertainty about whether his presence would be sufficient to overcome the biological claims that Rodriguez was asserting through the court system. That evening, as Maya and Mia completed their bedtime routines with the careful attention to normalcy that had become their strategy for managing anxiety, Darius found himself contemplating the possibility that Thursday's hearing might be their last night together as a family. The custody petition represented a legal challenge that could undo everything they had built together, regardless of their emotional bonds or the twins' obvious preference for remaining in his care. Marcus and Keisha had remained in town to provide support during the custody hearing, transforming the penthouse into a fortress of family unity that would either celebrate victory or process devastating loss by week's end. Their presence reminded Darius that the twins had gained not just a guardian, but an entire extended family who would fight to protect them from returning to the violence their mother had died escaping. The emergency custody petition lay on his desk like a declaration of war against the family they had created together. Its legal language threatened to reduce Maya and Mia from beloved daughters to contested property in a bureaucratic process that might prioritize biological relationships over emotional bonds and safety considerations. As sleep gradually claimed the twins in their shared bedroom, Darius sat vigil in his office, reviewing legal strategies and evidence that would determine whether love and commitment could triumph over blood claims and manipulated legal arguments. The threadbare teddy bear rested between Maya and Mia as they slept, serving as a tangible reminder of their mother's sacrifice and the responsibility he had accepted to honor her final wish by protecting her daughters from the violence that had claimed her life. Thursday morning would bring the culmination of a battle that had begun when Sofia Rodriguez placed her daughters beneath a snow-covered pine tree, trusting that a stranger's kindness could provide the safety and love that she could no longer guarantee. The custody hearing would determine whether her sacrifice had succeeded in securing her daughter's future, or whether the system she had tried to circumvent would ultimately return them to the danger she had died trying to prevent. The family courtroom felt smaller than Darius had anticipated, with wood-paneled walls that seemed to absorb sound and create an atmosphere of hushed solemnity appropriate for decisions that would alter children's lives forever. Judge Margaret Harrison presided from an elevated bench that commanded attention, while Maya and Mia sat in the front row between Darius and Dr. Chen, their small hands clasped together in mutual support. Carlos Rodriguez sat across the aisle with his court-appointed attorney, his appearance carefully managed to project the image of a concerned stepfather rather than the violent man that police reports had documented. His clean-shaven face and conservative clothing could not disguise the calculating expressions that crossed his features whenever he looked at the twins, causing both girls to instinctively move closer to Darius. This emergency custody hearing will determine the appropriate placement for Maya and Mia Rodriguez, Judge Harrison announced, consulting the case files that would inform her decision. The court will consider testimony from all parties, expert witnesses, and the children themselves before making a determination that serves their best interests. Sarah Morrison approached the bench with confidence, born from thorough preparation and overwhelming evidence supporting Darius's guardianship. Her opening statement painted a clear picture of Sofia Rodriguez's desperate flight from domestic violence and her careful selection of Darius as the person most capable of providing her daughters with safety and opportunity. Your Honor, Morrison began, the evidence will show that Sofia Rodriguez sacrificed her life to remove her children from a dangerous situation. Her deliberate choice of Mr. King as their guardian reflects careful research and sound judgment about who could best provide for their welfare. Rodriguez's attorney, a young public defender named James Hartley, countered with arguments about blood relationships and family unity that sounded reasonable until contrasted with evidence of domestic violence and the twins' obvious fear of their stepfather. His presentation focused on legal technicalities rather than the children's emotional needs or safety concerns. The state recognizes Mr. Rodriguez's parental rights as the legal husband of the children's mother, Hartley argued. These children belong with family members who understand their cultural background and can provide connections to their heritage. The argument about cultural connections might have carried more weight if Rodriguez had demonstrated genuine interest in the twins' welfare, rather than viewing them as property to be reclaimed. Detective Sullivan's testimony about Rodriguez's violence towards Sofia and his suspicious behavior following her disappearance painted a picture of someone motivated by control rather than love. Mr. Rodriguez never inquired about the children's welfare or location until after we began investigating Sofia's disappearance, Detective Sullivan testified when called to present evidence. His primary concern seemed to be avoiding scrutiny rather than ensuring their safety. Dr. Chen's testimony provided crucial insight into the twins' emotional state and their feelings about potential placement options. Her professional assessment carried particular weight because of her expertise in childhood trauma and her ongoing therapeutic relationship with Maya and Mia. Both children have made remarkable progress in Mr. King's care, Dr. Chen explained to the court. They show secure attachment patterns, improved emotional regulation, and consistent statements about feeling safe in their current placement. Conversely, they exhibit clear signs of anxiety and fear when discussing Mr. Rodriguez. The moment arrived for Maya to provide testimony that could determine her and Mia's future. Judge Harrison had arranged for the questioning to occur in chambers rather than open court, with only essential personnel present to minimize the intimidation factor for such young witnesses. Maya sat in a chair that had been adjusted to accommodate her height, with Darius positioned nearby to provide emotional support during what promised to be a difficult conversation. Her voice remained steady as she answered Dr. Chen's gentle questions about her memories and feelings. "Maya," Dr. Chen said softly, "can you tell Judge Harrison about your feelings when you think about living with Carlos?" "I don't want to go with Carlos," Maya replied with quiet determination that carried surprising strength. "He made Mama scared. He made her cry and hide from him. Mama said he was dangerous." When asked about her life with Darius, Maya's entire demeanor brightened with genuine happiness that could not be manufactured or coached. "Darius takes care of us. He helps with homework and reads stories and makes us feel safe. He loves us, like Mama did." Mia's testimony, though briefer due to her typically quiet nature, proved equally compelling. Her simple statement that Darius makes the scared feelings go away provided powerful evidence about the security and healing she had found in his care. The final evidence presentation included Sophia's research materials about Darius, demonstrating her careful consideration of his character and capabilities as a guardian. Detective Sullivan had recovered these documents from Sophia's belongings, providing tangible proof of her deliberate choice rather than random abandonment. Judge Harrison recessed the hearing for deliberation, leaving both sides to wait anxiously for a decision that would determine whether the family that Darius, Maya, and Mia had built together would be permitted to continue or forcibly dissolved by legal decree. When court reconvened 30 minutes later, Judge Harrison held the custody ruling that would become the official documentation of her decision. The formal legal language would determine the trajectory of 3 lives that had become intertwined through circumstances that transcended traditional family structures. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence, Judge Harrison announced, this court finds that the best interests of Maya and Mia Rodriguez are served by continued placement with Mr. Darius King under formal guardianship arrangements. The relief that flooded through Darius felt almost physical in its intensity, while Maya and Mia immediately turned to him with expressions of joy that reflected their understanding that they would remain together as a family. Carlos Rodriguez's face contorted with rage that revealed the true nature behind his carefully constructed facade. Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, the court is granting Mr. King's petition for adoption proceedings to commence immediately, providing these children with permanent legal family status that reflects their emotional bonds and best interests. The custody ruling, bearing the court's official seal and Judge Harrison's signature, represented more than legal victory. It provided official recognition that love and commitment could create family bonds that equaled or exceeded biological relationships. The document would serve as permanent proof that Maya and Mia belonged with the man who had rescued them from abandonment and chosen to build his life around their welfare. As they left the courtroom, Maya reached for Darius's hand, while Mia clutched the threadbare teddy bear that had provided comfort throughout their legal ordeal. Carlos Rodriguez's angry protests to his attorney faded into background noise as the newly affirmed family walked toward their future together. The custody ruling tucked safely in Sarah Morrison's briefcase represented the legal foundation for a relationship that had already been cemented by daily routines, bedtime stories, homework assistance, and countless small moments that transformed strangers into family. Maya and Mia would never again face the threat of separation from the man who had become their father in every way that mattered. And Darius would never again face the possibility of losing the children who had given his life meaning and purpose. The courthouse steps felt like a threshold between their uncertain past and secure future as they walked toward the car that would take them home to celebrate a victory that honored Sofia Rodriguez's sacrifice and fulfilled her final wish for her daughter's safety and happiness. 6 months later, the adoption papers arrived on a crisp spring morning that felt like the perfect metaphor for new beginnings. The official documents, signed by Judge Harrison and bearing the state seal, transformed Maya and Mia from guardianship wards into legal daughters, with all the rights and security that permanent family status provided. Darius King had officially become what he had been in practice since that snowy December evening, a father. The threadbare teddy bear that had once represented the twins' only connection to stability now rested on a bedroom shelf, alongside newer toys and books that reflected their expanding world of possibilities. Maya had decided that the worn, stuffed animal deserved a place of honor rather than daily handling, preserving it as a memorial to their mother's love and the journey that had brought them to their current happiness. "Papa," Maya said, using the title that had emerged naturally as their relationship deepened beyond guardianship into genuine family bonds. "Can we frame the adoption papers like you did with your business awards?" The request reflected her desire to display evidence of their legal family status with the same pride that Darius had once reserved for corporate achievements. The comparison between adoption documents and business accolades highlighted how completely his priorities had shifted from professional success to family happiness. "Of course, sweetheart," Darius replied, reviewing the legal documents that made their family official in the eyes of the law. "These papers are more important than any business award I've ever received." The adoption papers would indeed be framed and displayed prominently in their home, serving as daily reminders that love and commitment had triumphed over bureaucracy and blood claims. The formal legal language could never adequately capture the emotional bonds that had formed during late-night homework sessions, weekend adventures, and countless small moments that transformed strangers into family. Mia, now more vocal and confident, after months of therapy and security, was helping Keisha prepare lunch in the kitchen, while Marcus taught her the proper technique for making his famous grilled cheese sandwiches. The sight of his daughter learning family recipes from her new uncle created a warm satisfaction that Darius had never experienced during his years of solitary success. The extended King family had been restored and strengthened by the addition of Maya and Mia, whose presence had healed relationships that had seemed irreparably damaged by grief and misunderstanding. Marcus and Keisha visited monthly, providing the twins with cousins, aunts, uncles, and grandparent figures who created the kind of extended family network that most children took for granted. Dr. Chen's final therapy report, submitted as part of the adoption proceedings, documented remarkable progress in both twins' emotional development and trauma recovery. Maya had become an excellent student who showed particular aptitude for science and mathematics, while Mia had discovered a talent for art that provided healthy outlets for emotions she still struggled to express verbally. Their attachment patterns are now secure and healthy, Dr. Chen had written in her assessment. Both children demonstrate resilience, emotional regulation, and trust in their caregivers that reflects significant healing from their early trauma. They have successfully integrated their past experiences with their current security to create stable psychological foundations for continued development. The clinical language described what Darius observed daily: two bright, happy children who had learned that adults could be trusted to provide consistent love and protection. Their transformation from frightened, abandoned waifs into confident, secure daughters represented one of the most profound accomplishments of his lifetime. Caroline had adapted remarkably to her expanded role, which now included school pickups, playdate coordination, and the countless logistical requirements of managing a household that included children. Her professional efficiency had extended seamlessly into family management, though she admitted that negotiating with 6-year-olds required different skills than handling corporate executives. The penthouse itself had been transformed from a sterile showcase into a warm family home filled with children's artwork, family photographs, and the comfortable clutter that accumulated when people actually lived in a space rather than simply occupying it. The modern furniture had been supplemented with child-friendly additions that prioritized function and comfort over aesthetic minimalism. Business remained important to Darius, but it no longer consumed his identity or dictated his priorities. King Tech Solutions continued to thrive under the leadership structure he had developed to accommodate his family responsibilities, proving that professional success could coexist with personal fulfillment rather than requiring the sacrifice of one for the other. The property in Montana where he had first discovered the twins had been converted into a summer retreat for the family, with the cabin restored and expanded to provide comfortable accommodations for extended stays. Maya and Mia enjoyed returning to the location where their new life had begun, though the pine tree where they had waited for rescue now stood in a beautifully landscaped garden rather than isolated wilderness, a small memorial plaque beneath. That tree honored Sofia Rodriguez's memory and her sacrifice to secure her daughter's future. The inscription, suggested by Maya herself, read, "A mother's love lives forever in the children she saved." The memorial provided a focal point for remembering Sofia while celebrating the life she had made possible for her daughters. As evening approached and the twins completed their homework at the kitchen island that had become their designated study space, Darius reflected on the journey that had transformed him from a successful but lonely businessman into a devoted father of two remarkable daughters. The adoption papers represented the legal conclusion of a process that had begun with a random act of kindness and evolved into the most meaningful relationship of his life. Maya looked up from her math homework with the bright smile that had become her trademark expression. "Papa, do you remember when we were scared in the snow?" "I remember everything about that night," Darius replied, settling beside her to review the problems she was solving with increasing confidence. "I'm glad you found us," Maya said simply, returning to her calculations with the matter-of-fact acceptance that children applied to life-changing events once they became part of their normal experience. "I'm glad I found you too," Darius agreed, watching as Mia carefully colored a drawing of their family that would join dozens of similar artwork decorating the refrigerator and walls throughout their home. The adoption papers lay on the counter. Nearby, their official language providing legal foundation for emotional bonds that had been forged through daily care, unconditional love, and the gradual healing of hearts that had been broken by loss and abandonment. These documents represented more than legal formality. They provided permanent security for two children who had learned that families could be created through choice and commitment, rather than only through biological accident. Sometimes, the most life-changing moments still arrived when people least expected them. But now, instead of facing such moments alone, Darius King had a family to share both challenges and celebrations. Maya and Mia had taught him that love multiplied rather than divided when shared, and that the greatest wealth was not measured in financial portfolios, but in the daily privileges of being called Papa by two extraordinary daughters who had chosen to trust him with their hearts. The threadbare teddy bear on the bedroom shelf stood as a silent witness to their transformation, from desperate strangers into a family bound by adoption papers, daily routines, and love that would endure long after the legal documents yellowed with age. Their story would continue tomorrow, and for all the years ahead, written in homework help, bedtime stories, and countless small moments that created the foundation of a family forever.